What are trances? What do trances have to do with creativity and the artistic process? Can we use the know-how of mystics to improve our creativity? There are greater and lesser degrees of being in a trance, and the entry-level trance states can be achieved today, and in fact all of us go into some degree of trance at some point in each day. The approaches to achieving trance states can be grouped into the positive and the negative, not like good or bad, but the active and the passive. And let's go ahead and talk about some of the positive approaches we can take. Let's start off by redefining what creativity is and what art making is. Why do we like being creative? Why do we like making art? Mostly it's because of the state that it puts us in. It puts us into a form of a sort of waking dream state, a state where we're lucid, we're awake, we have access to our memories, we can make rational decisions, we can consciously consider things that are happening, and yet we're able to live in this sort of dream space, this sort of imagined space. The first exercise you can start on is to think about the times when you're creative, when you're making art, and view them differently, view them as trance states, and consider how that is a significantly different mode of state of mind. The reason this is a different state of mind is that we can still be aware of the physical world, and most of the time we are, only to the degree that we need to use the physical world to back up and reinforce this other world, this world of imagination. If you've ever tried meditation, most of the simplest of meditations are designed to take you either, all the way through all the beginning stages of meditation into the deepest states into the deepest meditative states. So even the most basic meditations can take you into the deepest state. And working creatively is very much the same way. You could be doodling while you're talking on the phone, or you can... The act of being creative and making art is very much like a meditation that can take you deeper and deeper and deeper into these trance states that are very natural. It's a very natural part of the way the human brain works. So let's use the idea of a mystic to inform how we can do this. Now, a mystic is someone who has gone out into the wilderness, and he or she is sitting there. Let's say that they have their food and water that they need, and they're in the environment, but it is as if they are not there. They are in their bodies, but it is as if they are somewhere else. They aren't moving, but it is as if they are traveling. So, being human allows us the access to a conscious mind, and we can use that conscious mind for things other than survival, and this is why we can go into these other states of being that still, the physical world and the environment are more like batteries that help supply the power for us to go into these other experiences. And they can still be there. It's just that we can kind of forget about them and leave them behind. That is the physical world and what it means to have bodies, eating, survival, all that. So, part of achieving a trance state is to learn to forget about our physical environment and all of that, to at least some degree. I'll talk to you about the way I do it with my writing, but go ahead and, in your mind, go through the process with me and think about how you can do it with the kind of art that you're making. So with my writing, it means that I definitely want to team up with my subconscious here. I want my subconscious to take over a lot of things that normally I would need to pay attention to. So I can forget about it and leave it behind and go more purely into that state of imagination, creation. With typing, I want to make sure I always practice typing to a point where I'm not even aware of it anymore. And the more that I do that, the more that I become more and more unaware of the words, the pages, the deleting, adding, changing, organizing, all of those things. The more that I can be practiced at those things to a point where I don't have to think about them and I can do them without paying attention to them, the more that I'm actually, my experience is all about this fictional place that I'm creating and making more substantial and feeding my conscious energy into and enjoying the rewards of a more developed fictional world. And so if anyone were to look in the room, they would see me just there at a typewriter. But as far as my experience is concerned, the reality is that I'm barely aware of that. I'm mostly aware of this other reality, and it's one that couldn't exist without my body and without my brain, but I can still leave all of that behind and let my subconscious take care of all of that. One of the first mistakes that people make about achieving mystic states is they get hung up on it. It's like, oh, I haven't achieved it, and they have this idea of a total transformation of experience where of intense alternate states of mind, and that does not help at all. It's much better to appreciate that different states of mind are a natural part of our daily lives. We go to sleep at night, where that seems so ordinary, and yet any consideration about that state is enough to appreciate how extreme that state is. And the way that, say that you're driving, a lot of the times you can drive without paying too much attention to it, and to some degree or another, we're sort of like in some stage of operating selflessly and allowing our subconscious to do a lot of the things that otherwise our conscious minds would need to be doing. Another thing that we can do is to appreciate that this is like any form of practice. It gradually gets better. And we're talking about in terms of years, not days. This is something where you can enjoy where you are with your level of trancing on art and appreciate it. Look forward to the fact that the more years that you invest in practicing art, the greater benefits of getting lost in your creative work you can achieve. So it isn't that we're very similar to mystics, it's that we are practicing a form of mysticism, and that is what the artist does. That is creativity. Like any mystical practice, we want to be in for the long haul. We want to practice the discipline and be patient and just enjoy where we are right now and know that it only gets better. So usually being creative is a lot more cluttered and elaborate than like a simple meditation. We're usually like cutting out things out of cardboard and mixing paint or whatever. But getting in that creative mode is a meditation, and if we think of it as, and also it's a great idea to practice meditation. Go ahead and study some basic meditation. It'll help you to appreciate that by doing a certain practice, we can go into different states of mind. So that's about the active forms of working towards a trance creative state. Let's talk about the more of the passive forms. So a lot of the times you'll hear advice to the extent like, if you really want to paint or sculpt, you really need to get a studio, or you really, if you're going to write, you really need to have a place in the house where no one will bother you. You really need that place, you know, where you go off by yourself, no distractions, and you're kind of put yourself in a bubble. You isolate yourself from regular daily activity, the rest of the world. And that's great, but that won't do any good if you bring all your worldly concerns in there with you. If you go to your little, you know, for me, I call it my space station. It's like when I'm working, I may as well be the idea of being so isolated that you're floating around on the space station, that much far away from everything. I really like the idea of it being like a bubble, it being a capsule separated from everything else in my life. And this is to achieve greater states of creativity. I look forward to the time when I can return to the world, when I can open the door and go back to all my regular concerns and my regular life. But to the extent that I can mentally go into isolation from regular day-to-day life, is to the extent that I can achieve greater creative states. Again, try not to get too hung up on this sort of thing. You know, the subconscious likes instruction, so that every time before you write or paint or make music, just tell yourself, I want to kind of forget about everything else for now. I want to work on this. I'll have plenty of time to think about all that stuff, you know, job, you know, all of that stuff. The reason routines, you know, you would think that a creative person would not want routines, that routines would seem too structured, but routines are helpful because they're ways that your subconscious knows what kind of operating mode it can go into. So if you have your writing hour on certain days of the week, when you go into that hour, your subconscious knows what the instruction sheet is for that space of time. And so over time, through that routine, it becomes as if you can step into that state. So when you go to that hour through that routine, it is as if you're stepping into that other state of mind. And it's helpful to consider your priorities a little bit. When doing art, it is not so much about what you come up with, what you finish, what you produce. We aren't merchants. We aren't generators of consumer items. It's more important to see how much you can abandon yourself to that other state, how much you can lose yourself in that other state of mind, how much you can get carried away by imagination. How these are the things that we're looking for, not how good your work is going to be when you're done with it. And it's helpful to really have a strong image of that different state of mind, the way that your body and the physical world is just like a battery that is fueling this other form of existence. And go ahead and think of it as another form of existence, just as substantial as the physical world, just as real, even though it still relies on us having bodies and living in the physical world in order to fuel and substantiate that other state of existence. Every single human every single moment of our lives, we live in two realities. We live in the physical world, and we live in the world of experience, and the world of the mind. And you could say one is the outer world and one is the inner world, but what we think of as the outer reality is actually a simulation of the outer reality that is generated in our inner reality. And imagination serves a purpose for survival. Imagination is the ability, is used to take all of the sensory information from all of our nerves and create this real-time reenactment of the physical world inside this reality we call the reality of mind. And that other reality, the inner reality, the reality of mind, the reality of pure imagination, that is the state where trance states can be achieved. Everything I've given in this video is enough to over time, over years, achieve great states of getting lost in art and creativity and using trance to achieve great states of being creative. One thing I didn't discuss was how great it feels to go into those creative trance states. Thanks for watching. Please remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. I'm considering making a video on lucid dreaming and creativity. If you think that's a good idea, please leave a comment saying, yes, make a video on lucid dreaming and creativity. So one of the characters in my story is he at one time, well, for 30 years he was a preacher, but then he went insane and ended up in a mental hospital, and he is unknowingly channeling my protagonist. So if this kind of thing you think is some interesting fiction, please go to solomation.com and check it out. So I hope you have a great time achieving gradually greater and greater states of creative trance, and I hope that your writing, drawing, whatever creative work you're doing is going very well, and I hope you have a good day.